So, guys, I want to do a really quick video about AEW, and I want to say that I know people have talked about this a few days ago, but I'm not happy with the Casino Gauntlet stipulation. Like, they added a stipulation that from now on, if you want to cash in your opportunity, you have to give the champion a week's notice. And the only good thing about that is that if you do an event like a pay per view, you can set up a stipulation where it's going to be like Kenny Omega versus Adam Page, and then you say, hey, it's going to turn to a triple threat, or you have to do something like have two championship matches. Like that's the only way you can kind of have an advantage. But I also don't like that they have the stipulation because you're going to run into two big issues. Um, that the number one thing is that people won't win with this title. It reminds me of Feast or Fired in TNA wrestling when you had PD Pump win it, and then you had Scott Steiner steal it from him, and then Scott Steiner loses because the reason was they didn't want to have PD Pump like beat the champion. Or you did something like you gave it to I think Kazarian won it one year, or somebody else won it one year, and you did something where they actually lost. And you also did, I think you did that with Samoa Joe and a few other people, where the Feast or Fired case, I don't think they even had a winner for the. That's why they kind of had like an option for the X Division and the tag team one, just because that way, if you have it for the heavyweight championship and that cash in's unsuccessful, you're like, oh well, at least we got 2 out of 3 really. But usually, if people are always losing or giving a week notice and then they're losing really, it's almost like why would I want to be in that match? Why would I want to be in that spot on the biggest show of the year really? Just to kind of like lose like that really, just lose all the time or get a stipulation where a majority of people lose. It makes no sense really. It's almost like what I said with the Continental Classic. Like it makes no sense to win a secondary title that's not really used that much during the year really. Like why would you go through all that just to have that? So it's diminishing return. The other issue that I would say about that is that Money in the Bank is a great concept because it's anytime, anywhere, and that's very helpful. The unpredictability is good. So it's almost like, like I said, if you do something like next year, if you have Kyle Fletcher versus Anthony Bowens for the TNT Championship, you get the title off of Kyle Fletcher, and Kyle Fletcher's ready to be a champion, and he wins that, what would happen if he cashes in on Will Ospreay at Wembley Stadium and he takes the title off of him, and then it creates another feud, like that could create a new feud, or you have Adam Page and he's injured, and then you have MJF cash in to cover that injury, or you have something like like the Death Riders win it, and then something like Hangman's kind of injured, but then you have Wheeler Yuta cash it in, or Claudio cash it in, or Pac cash it in on the behalf of like having that that element of anybody could be a champion with it could be good, or like I said, you have Anthony Bowens where he could win that at one point, or you do something like you say, okay, well, Bandito. There's 2 heavyweight championships in AEW. There's the AEW championship and there's a Ring of Honor championship. So what would happen if Bandito gets injured and then you have MJF cash in on him and be like, okay, fuck it, I'm gonna take it from this Mexican, and because he's done kind of like the ice type of gimmick in MLW type of thing really. So and then you do Mystico versus MJF for the ROH Championship, like that element of anybody can kind of cash in anytime, anywhere is so helpful. And I think the last thing that I would say really is that you really have to establish this contract and the stipulation. You still have time really, but you fucked it up this year with Christian Cage cashing in and messing that up really. So it's almost like when you have stipulations or or like something like you win this certain match and you get like an opportunity for a heavyweight championship, you have to make sure that people are actually winning. So then there people are like, okay, then it's worth actually watching these matches or being invested in it. Like for example, they had this stipulation, I believe, that if you win, like you think AEW Homecoming or Fighter Fest, which usually happens at the beginning of the year, you win an opportunity to face the champion at a later date, really. And Wardlow had that, I believe, against Samoa Joe, and a few other people had that against. And I think like one year you had Ricky Starks, really, but they kept kind of doing that thing. Or it's almost like the Dynamite Diamond Ring with how MJF has won like 5 years in a row, really. Like first of all, what does the ring mean, really? And the second thing is like, if he wins 5 years in a row, how are you going? How is that really something that anybody wants, really? Because he's always going to win that. And I also think that another thing that I will say is ultimately, like as I said, really, it should be an anytime anywhere stipulation. It should create some excitement, and that's all important. And then the last thing that I'll say is it prevents people from experimenting. Like for example, like last year, imagine if Wardlow won that and he cashed that in on Samoa Joe, or he cashed that in on MJF, really, when you did something like MJF versus Samoa Joe. Imagine if Adam Cole had Wardlow cash it in, so he had a couple months of Wardlow as the champion, and then you did something where you put on Swerve because you're like, okay, Wardlow's not working out, or you injury angle, or you do a triple threat between Wardlow, Samoa Joe, and Swerve, or something like that. Really, it you then you create a new star within that, or you do something like maybe like as I said, like like Moxley wasn't working out. What would happen if you gave the Christian? He wins at he wins. He turns to a triple threat, and then he wins it from Moxley, and then you had him for a couple of weeks, and then you're kind of like, hey, you know what? We'll put it back on Moxley, and that'd be that, really. Like Christian gets overly confident, and then he doesn't listen to his group, and then he creates some dysfunction, really. So it it's bad because part of good professional wrestling sometimes is almost like when your back is against the wall and you gotta experiment. So sometimes when you have these contracts, you may be like, hey, you know what? Maybe we can spend a couple of months with a new champion and somebody completely different, and we'll see how that works. Or like I've said, really, you look at MJF. What would happen if he said, "Hey, the heavyweight, like ROH is a heavyweight champion, is a heavyweight championship." So you're gonna do maybe they have another show in Mexico. And you have something where MJF says he's gonna cash it in on Bandito, or it's anytime anywhere. So he wins it from Bandito, and they're gonna have a rematch at Arena Mexico. Like imagine the heel versus babyface dynamic of that. Or what would happen if he enters Bandito, and then you're going to do Mystico versus MJF for the Ring of Honor Championship. Like, imagine the pop and how much that would do for the company, really. So I think that sometimes when you have these championships and you don't have people win or take advantage of the stipulations, it hurts a lot of chances to experiment, try new things, and establish stipulations as something that fans must see, really, because I think that as Vince McMahon, the best line, the best thing he said about WWE is that anything can happen, really, and when that happens, you have unpredictability, really, and I think with AEW, like I said, I think they just want to do something one way, and they may be like, okay, no matter what, it's easier to keep it that way than to just experiment a little bit. So that's how I feel about all that. It's unfortunate that they don't want to they want to make it way harder for somebody to cash in, really, and that's just not good. And ultimately, like I said, if you have a lot of people lose that stipulation, then it's almost like as I said, why would a fan really care about it? Because it's almost like saying, oh, you're just gonna have a match with the champion and you're gonna lose, really. And then it's going to be irrelevant afterwards. Because, like with Christian, what happened to him after, it's not like he's in the heavyweight championship picture after trying to cash in on Moxley. Or I think you had Ricky Starks, I believe, one year. And then you had, challenge, not with the Feaster, not with that contract, but at another time. So ultimately, like I said, you need to find ways to build people upwards and experiment and try new things, really. So this whole entire stipulation is saying, nope, you gotta cash in a week in advance so that way your champion can recover, really. Um, it's just completely stupid, and it's bad that they're doing it like that. I know it makes it different from WWE, anytime, anywhere, but this is just a time where copycatting may be better than trying to do something a little different.